Welcome to Open Doors. My name is Jennifer Title. We are today talking with Teresa Mastin, the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University. And we're talking to Teresa today a little bit about her experiences in her work, her experiences transitioning from an academic position to a position, a non-tenure track position at Northwestern, and learning a little bit about her path and her decision making. So thanks for joining us, Teresa.
Thank you.
So we're going to get started here, and you're a little bit different than some of our guests in so much as you actually worked a faculty position for several years before transitioning out of academe, not really out of academe, to a different kind of position. Could you talk to us a little bit about your path from graduate school to faculty position to your current position?
Sure. So I did my graduate work, my doctoral work at Michigan State, and I went from Michigan State. Well, let me back up and say, like, I had a career in the investment industry before going to work on my doctorate. The reason for leaving the investment community was that I felt like I really wanted to make a difference, and I was doing a really great job of helping really wealthy people become more wealthy. And basically what I did, if you think about it in the public relations context, was to do the reports for the high net worth clients to help them to understand why it was so important that they stay with our firm. But because my background, I come from a very, very poor background, I felt like I wasn't really doing anything to make a difference. So I thought, well, going to graduate school would help. So I go to Michigan State, where I earned my Ph.D. from, I think, 94 to 98, and then went off to Middle Tennessee State University, which is in Tennessee. I was in investments in Southern California, but I was going back home to Tennessee. So I was there for 5 years at Middle Tennessee State, was recruited back to Michigan State, was there 5 years, which is where I earned tenure. And thought that I would actually finish my career there, because what I was doing that I really loved, I was spending a lot of time in Rwanda with health communications, and I thought, this is really great. And again, really thought that I would end my career there. So then I get a call one day from DePaul, which is in Chicago, basically saying, we're starting a new college of communication, and we think you could be a really great fit. Can you come? Would you come and talk with us? Well, I was really honest with them, because I was really, really loving Michigan State at that time. And I told them, I said, I love Chicago. I just got back from Rwanda on a research trip, and I'm happy to come and talk with you about it, but I'm going to pay for my trip because I'm not leaving, but I'd love to come and visit you guys. So I came to presentation, and they told me about this center that they had called the Stain Center, and basically it's all about community engagement. And they, of course, smart on their part, set up a meeting with me with those folks, and I began to think, oh no, maybe this is a good fit for me. So I applied, and they brought in 8 new people that year. I was the only person that they brought in as tenured. And it was really interesting, because when I went for my interview, it was a snowstorm, so I got stuck in Detroit, and I made it the next day, but my luggage didn't, so it was great. I got to give my research presentation and this wonderful sweater and jeans. But I got the position, came to DePaul, and almost immediately, a Kenya team, a public health Kenya team, invited me to join their team. And so I started spending lots of time working in Kenya, and really loved that too, because it's very similar to Rwanda, right next door. And so my goal was to become full so that I could spend more time doing that. So I did. I was able to become full, but then immediately I was tracked into becoming an administrator, because there were so few women, so few African Americans, and that was not making a difference, unless you consider, people were upset because they had slightly less square footage in their office than someone else, those important things in life. So but I still thought that I would finish my career there. And then one day, this position that I'm in now, diversity inclusion at Feinberg, came across my desk. And I honestly don't know. I cannot tell you what encouraged me to apply for it. But it was around that time that I learned that there were more African-American men in medicine and medical school in 1978 than currently. And I'm like, oh my goodness, something has to be done. What is wrong with this? So I went for I applied and thinking, well, you've got to apply because you're thinking about it, but you won't get an interview. So I got the interview. I will never forget it. I was in this beautiful room looking out on the lake on Lakeshore Drive. Me and I think it was one epidemiologist and 8 medical doctors. And I thought, oh, wow. So I thought this is clearly just a conversation. And it was a great conversation. I got a call back and eventually got the offer. And so I had to, I was really excited, but then I started to think, are you going to walk away from this full professor position where you know what's going on? You seem to be a viable person. I mean, they seem to appreciate you, and start on something that, yes, it would be making a difference, but it's a totally different space. So that's actually how it all happened. And we are 9 months into it. And I think a lot of days I think, what have you done? But I'm very thankful that I've done it. I mean, it's really stretching me. But it's really, really a good place to be. And actually, all of those years as an academic, it's been incredibly valuable. The thing that I miss most, that I hope to be doing again shortly, I really miss the classroom, because there's nothing like being able to, one of the great things about the classroom for me was I could go to Kenya and do this work and then go back and take it to the classroom, and the students we would always have projects going on where we were doing things that really made a difference. And so, being able to merge those things, being able to help students get excited about it, giving them an opportunity to start in that applied space, there is really nothing like it. And so that's the thing that I miss. And I have a small group of medical students now, or I had. Graduation is Monday, I believe. But it's possible that I'll be in the classroom again soon. And I'm really excited about that.
Fantastic. So, wow, so many good things there, and interesting things to follow up on. I think I'll go with right now the position that you're currently in and thinking about that on a day-to-day basis. So you were talking about missing teaching. Are you still student-facing in your job? Are you still working with students throughout the day? What does your day-to-day or week-to-week look like?
I am still working with students, but not in the same way. So mostly what I'm charged with here, there are a couple of things. The things that are really outfacing that people see, I'm responsible for the website and I'm responsible for the newsletter. But really and truly what my job is to behind the scenes work to change the culture, to make diversity inclusion, to help diversity inclusion become a part of the fiber of the organization. And of course, like many organizations, medicine is very hierarchical. And for people that things work really well, where there's absolutely nothing wrong with what's going on, and then people actually say too that, well, this is science. So either you do well or you don't do well. There's no, there's nothing else that goes into the equation, but it's like anything else. It's obviously that's true to a level, but who you know and how comfortable you are in a particular space makes a big difference. So the office that I'm in, if I were to open my door right now, there's probably not anybody out there right now, but underrepresented minority students hang out here a lot for planning issues, thinking about things that would make it a better experience for them. That's a big part of what I do. Even though the person who had this position before, I think all she did was work with students. And that's been one of the tricky pieces, because I don't do that, and a lot of people think that I do that. And whereas I think that is really important, I don't think that's going to help us move forward the way we need to move forward in this space. So on the one hand, I do spend time with students, but not nearly as much as you would think I would in a position like this.
So it sounds like you have strategic goals.
Yes.
For moving the organization forward. Can you talk us through a little bit about how you plan those, how you hope to implement them?
Right. So there are a couple of things that I'm working on. I'll use one example to give you a sense of things that I'm doing. So the I think it's Association for American Medical Colleges, AAMC, is an organization that we work with a lot. So they're housed, rightly so, in Washington, D.C., so that they can be involved with a lot of things on the Hill. So one of the things that I'm doing is doing an executive healthcare diversity inclusion certificate with them. So how can you strategically move things forward? And there's a huge project that has to go along with that. So for that project, I started out with was going to start out with beginning with a class of 2020, the incoming class, doing a survey with them before they actually arrive, what they think of diversity inclusion, the impacts that it would have on health and healthcare disparities. But the problem with that is that resources, and so I had to do something that works within the existing curriculum. And so that idea got totally shot down because I have to work with medical education. So now what I'll be doing, or it seems I will be doing, we're on several iterations of this, we'll be working with, we'll have a class that's an elective that incoming students can sign up with. So this will be a pilot of sorts. And what we'll do is work on intergroup dialogue. And so it's highly likely that the overarching topic for this elective class will be microaggressions. But what I like to do in this, will have conversations that considers diversity and inclusion broadly speaking. So there might be a session on sexual orientation, on religion, on gender, on race, so all of these different things, so that, like if you think about students, and you think about Chicago, one of the things that I find very problematic about this, the School of Medicine is basically on the Gulf Coast. And if you think about the Gulf Coast of Chicago, and you think about what's going on in the south side of Chicago, it's very easy for students to be here and to never, ever venture outside of the Gulf Coast. That's a problem. It is a huge problem. So one of the ways that we can begin, and I'm learning that, you really have to take small steps. First of all, you have to have a conversation. You can't just plop, I would take my DePaul students, I would literally take them to the South Side and say, we're having this first class there. Can't really do that here. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. So, and again, you can see how that will work with the culture, getting the students in the way, because there's no way I could even begin to start with the faculty. That's a whole nother can of worms. So if I can, start there. The other thing, if you know about the match process, slightly off this year from last year. So I just got back from Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago, where I was certified to do intercultural development inventory. And so before the next match happens, all of the program directors will have to go through the training, as well as the residents. And so this whole thing is, why was it off? We say one thing, but at the end of the day, the match system here is based on what are your scores and what's your pedigree. And so if we can't look beyond that, then things are never going to change. So that's another cultural thing, right? Working with the program directors. Okay, this is where you think you are, but based on this test we just took, this is where you are. How do we move this so that we're actually talking about things that matter, that we actually change what's going on in the landscape? So those are a couple of things that we're doing to really try to change the culture across the board. And even with that, it's going to take such a long time to move the needle, but it's good that I think that the commitment is there. And so in that regard, thinking about leaving that comfortable space, coming into a space that it's like, oh my God, I am not totally comfortable in this space, but it's totally pushing me and it's totally important, and we have to start someplace.
I can hear sort of your passion just under the surface. So I guess this may be an unusual question, but how do you balance that, or how do you balance that in this role, your passion for change, with sort of an administrative type of role, student service administrative policy role that you play, versus when you were a faculty member, or perhaps even in your life before that, in investments? So I hear sort of that balance, and how do you maintain that?
It's really difficult, and that's my main struggle. I feel like in my previous position as a full professor and as the director of my program area, I didn't realize how much control I had. I didn't realize that I could say, look, we're going to do this, we're going to go down this road. And as long as it was in the purview of what, the strategic plan was for the college, it was okay. But here there's so many other factors. So for example, just to be quite honest about it, the person that I report to, who is the Vice Dean of Diversity Inclusion, well, he wears many hats. He's also the head of cardiology, right? And so he's an African American male, but he's also thinking about his career. He's thinking about what the dean thinks. And so there are all of these different variables. So for example, so we're on two campuses. So the professional campus is downtown and the undergrad campus is north. It's in Evanston. So we typically partner for the Martin Luther King celebration here. We typically partner with a law school. And because there's typically so much money involved, because we bring in high profile speakers, it's a joint effort. So I got an email earlier this week from the North Campus saying, hey, we're thinking of bringing in Cornell West. What we want to know, we'll feature that on the North Campus. Are you guys interested on the Chicago campus? We'll give you guys like a lunch space so that you can have a lunch talk with him. And, and this is really great because we can invite the community first. Well, I jumped all over that and said, absolutely, we're in. Well, I shouldn't have done that. I should have checked with the person that I reported to, right? Because Cornell West is a controversial figure in some ways. And so there are all of these different things going on. So I said yes, but then the person, my counterpart in law, said yes too. But then she came back and said, oh my God, I can't say yes. Let me go back and talk to him. And then I realized, oh my God, I didn't check with Clyde. So I sent Clyde an email and I said, so sorry, I said yes to this. I'm sure I should have checked with you before. And he basically said, well, this is really great. This is exciting. But because North Campus is signing off on it, that, insulates us. We're fine. We don't have to worry about it. But I wouldn't have thought to do that before. So those things that you have to think about the political implications. So a couple of years ago, Ben Carson was here. He was here as a physician. So like all of those different things, you have to think about so many more layers of things.
Do you find that challenge appealing? How does that sit? I mean, moving from that position of so much control to working in such a tight system, such a political system.
I actually find it kind of hypocritical, and I do find it challenging. But I realize that I'm coming to it from a different place, right? I'm not an MD, and I just want to make a difference, and I want us to move forward. And it's really not that simple. And so there, you get into a lot of different things that, I mean, and just like in anything, you learn a lot about yourself. So, for example, one of the things that I was very surprised about when I arrived was that I mentioned earlier that there are more African-American males that were in medical school in 78 than presently. But one of the things that I learned when I became here, that most of that, like you'll see it very carefully named, right? It will be Black students. Well, there are very, very, very few African-American students. They're mostly African or Caribbean. Now, that's great, and they're absolutely amazing students, but that does absolutely nothing for the problems that we have here. Because I'm thinking about it in the context of people are going to go back to the neighborhoods. People are going to go back to the areas. Many of these students are going to go home, which is fine. But this doesn't do anything for the problems that we have. And we do know that minority students are more likely to go back to minority communities. So how are we addressing that issue? So for me, what I'm thinking about, how do we start these pipelines? Well, coming out of the investment industry, what's really frustrating to me, if you think about the investment industry, how we got into so many problems, it was short-term thinking as opposed to long-term thinking, right? Short-term investments, wanting to get those returns as opposed to thinking about, no, you go slow and steady and in the long term you'll be fine. Well, there are a lot of people who want to support a pipeline program, but they want the results now. Whereas because we've got the issues that we have, any pipeline program that starts with you as African-American students, you're not going to see the results of that for really decades, if we're honest about it. And yet no one's really willing to go there. And it's a rock between a hard place. It's just like any research you do, right? If you're going to have NIH funding, you want to set it up in a way so that you're going to see some positive results. So you understand what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's like, are we making decisions that will actually help us get there to solve the problems that we have. And so, yes, I'm at a point in my life where I basically want to make things happen and want to do things for the real reason and have conversations that, don't have 10 layers. And frankly, that's where I am, but that's not how the world works. And so, yeah, that is kind of frustrating. I had this weird situation a couple of weeks ago where we go to the North Campus to have dinner, myself and the person I report to, and another person who is the director of multicultural, all of these titles, I still don't know where they are, to have with the new associate provost for diversity and inclusion on the North Campus. And so we're having this dinner, and they can see like this little agitation. And what's so funny, like the person I report to, like, I didn't see any of this, when you were going through the interview process. It's like, who did I hire? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. But, the thing is, I've said, look, I'm willing to dedicate my life to make a difference in this space. This is what I want to do. And so we're in totally different buildings. Again, he's the head of cardiology. When I go to meet with him, I have to compete with his patients, and obviously they come first. But he stopped by my office the next day, and he said, I just want you to know that I really appreciate it, and I'm so glad that you feel that way, and that, you're part of the team. But for me too, there's a balance. There's a time and place for that. I obviously couldn't have said that in the dean's meeting, but with that small group, I could just be very honest about, like, look, you've got to, move some things forward. How do we do that within the space that we're in?
So I'll extend that just a little bit and say, what kinds of personalities, if you will, do you think could thrive in the kind of work that you do?
Yeah. One of the things that's so incredibly important is being able to listen well, and knowing when to say something and when not, but also understanding, which I totally didn't understand, what the learning curve is and how incredibly important it is to get a sense of the culture that you're in. One of the things that was really great, I was allowed to have the opportunity to make a lot of meetings to talk with a lot of key people, and I was able to do that under the context of, I'm doing the newsletter, right? So I need to talk with, certain people to get a sense of what's going on. The other thing too, which I think I didn't do well, and this almost blew up in my face, is to realize where the tension is. So, for example, both very, very wonderful people. Oh my God, I'm going to get in so much trouble depending on who sees this. Looking at where the overlaps are. So there's actually some overlap between the Vice Dean of Diversity and Inclusion and the Vice Dean of Education. Both wonderfully brilliant, dedicated people. But when you get into that space that they each own or perceive that they own, it's easy to get caught in the crossfire. And so in situations like that, it's important to know that they exist, but also to have a very frank conversation with both of them to say, look, my only agenda is to make a positive difference in this space. All I care about is making a difference and making this a better place, a better space and a better place. And if anything ever comes up where it seems that I said something or did something that speaks otherwise, know that it's not true, and definitely feel comfortable coming to me and saying so. But getting to know that culture and knowing who the players are and how the organization works, who is totally offended if they're not called doctor, like all of those things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Knowing what's going on. But the other thing is, bless you, is knowing when to listen to somebody, and this is a student thing, more of a student thing, a student and staff thing, knowing when to say to someone, I listen, like I hear you and I feel your pain, but also saying, you can't really attend to that right now. You're in this space. You're just going to have to, and I know this is going to sound really harsh, but I think there is a time and a place for this, is to say, you've got to suck this up and move on, because we can have this conversation. I can listen to you to help you get it out of your system. but the only road we can go down right now is going to hamper you, and it's going to prevent you from moving forward. I mean, unless it's something that, you know, there are things that it's like, wait, we've got to stop and address this. But there's a time and a place to say, you know, I totally understand, but right now it's not worth your issue. You're going to look back on this in 4 years and realize that it's really a non-issue. It's not, this is not the time and the place to go down the road about this particular issue.
Careful decisions. So you have this wonderful sort of resilience and energy. I can hear in your conversation how you just keep. It seems like when barriers come up, you find a way around them, or over them, or through them. Or I think about graduate students that I work with and the struggles that they feel, and thinking about what kinds of positions would be fulfilling if it's potentially they came into graduate school, they were thinking about a professorship. They maybe changed their mind, or they're working in a field where that's very difficult to achieve, and they're thinking where else they could be satisfied. And I picture a lot of them actually thinking about roles like yours because they're very interested in making change. Advice for them, what would they need to go about doing, either in graduate school, after graduate school? How could they gain the kinds of experiences that would position them well for working in a role like yours?
Yeah, try to be as diverse as possible in grad school. Like, take classes in a lot of different places. The other thing, though, that's like outside of grad school that is so incredibly important, experience. Like, I sit on, well, now I'm only sitting on one board. Like, I sit on a community mental health board that is so invaluable. You know, get involved in that way. And there's such a need. But also, before I made this transition, I talked to a lot of people. So again, I have a communication background too. So I went and talked with people. And I mean, one of the great things is I'm in Chicago, right? So I went and talked with key people that I knew at public relations agencies, not just the communication folks. I'm like, can you set up a meeting with me with your diversity and inclusion people? I need to know what some of the issues are, what some of the things that, you know, what some of the challenges are, what are the things that I need to think about. And I talk with people, you know, at various different levels, and it made a big difference. The other thing too is that, like, you've got to, there has to be people that you can actually call, right? So for me, that's communication and health. Like in Chicago, there are different people that I know. So whatever your organizations are, whatever the membership organizations are. So for me, it's Public Relations Society of America, some of the health organizations. You've got to spend that extra time to be involved and to be engaged. I never, you know, like, I'm on LinkedIn and I don't keep it up as great as I should, but I never hesitate if I meet someone or talk with someone to follow up and say, hey, you know, thank you. So for example, just this week, the head of HR for the hospital, and there's so many, like, it's Northwestern Medicine, but like all of these hospitals, so like right next door to me is Prentice Women's Hospital. Right next door to that is Lurie's Children. Right across the street is Northwestern Medicine. You would think we were all a group, but we're not. It's totally separate. But the folks at Lurie's Children, they invited me to actually sit on their diversity board. The folks that invited me to sit on those boards. I could say, you know, maybe a year down the road, but no, it's been critically important. So at one of those, I met the head of HR for the hospital, for Northwestern Medical. So she just out of the blue called me this week, or called me a couple of weeks ago, and invited me to this high-powered talking about race in difficult situations meeting. That, I mean, there's no way I would have been a part of that meeting. So I learned a lot. I'll be able to use a lot of that in the space that I'm working with, actually on my AAMC project. But what made her think of me, right? So again, it's just, you just have to take advantage of the different opportunities and just get out there and get to know people. And again, frankly, so North Campus is starting a couple, they just launched a couple of really large grants in the diversity inclusion space. Well, after we had that dinner with with the associate provost, basically said to him, you know what, we're going to be submitting a proposal, Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions about this? Like, loosely speaking, this is what it's going to be. Now, I know that he's eager to start a pipeline program, right? And so all of those little things that will make a difference. We may not get it, but at least he's thinking about us in the context and knows that we're willing to put our all in it. So it's about, doing what you can to connect all of those pieces. If you think about it in the context of linking and scaffolding, the way a lot of people study, do that in the context of getting to know people, do that in the context of your career. And it makes all the difference in the world, I believe.
Fantastic networking advice, actually.
Yeah.
So I know that you're the kind of person that is open to new things and saying yes. You said yes to us. You tried and, worked through all of our tech troubles we've had. Excuse me. Cough today. But how then, I guess my question would be, do you maintain sort of your own personal balance with participating in so many activities?
I've never been married, never had children. And that's one of the things I struggle with. Whereas I'm an introvert, I'm definitely a workaholic. And I struggle with balance. It's so funny that you should mention this, because so this AAMC project that I'm working on, there's a cohort of 16 of us. And we've already met twice. We have to go to, we have webinars every week, sometimes twice a week, but we meet for a solid week in DC. And it's weird how the 16 of us have gotten really close. And just this morning, a physician in someplace in Southern California, she decided that we need to have weekly check-in calls just to, make sure that there's balance and everything. Now, she's married with a family. Her oldest child is 14. And that's what we were talking about this morning. One of the problems that I had in my last position, I think being single, whether I doing this, but I think that I do define myself more than I should with my work. So then I become a workaholic, and then I totally become consumed with it. And I'm really working on that balance here. So like tomorrow I have an opera. And so I've got all of these things that I actually have to put fun things in my calendar. And I have a wide range of friends that I spend time with. But one of the things that I'm trying to do in this position is not let that creep happen. And for me, someone like me, that I do define myself so much by what I do, it's I'm very, very aware of programming. So I'm trying to do more like an 8 to 5, 9 to 6. I'm trying to make life more the thing on the weekends, as opposed to, just falling back into work. But that's what I really do want to caution people on, is that balance. Because if you're a workaholic and you do this, you create problems on both sides. You create problems for people that you report to who feel like, well, why doesn't everybody do that? And then you create for problems people who do have families and other things, that they physically can't do that. So the balance is good for all parties involved in that way. And so I think it's really good to have a friend or friends who basically say to you, okay, you're doing it again. Why are you doing this? There's absolutely no reason for this. Have people that will be really honest with you and check you on it.
That's great advice. So just one more quick question. I always like to turn the tables a little bit on folks who have potentially been on both sides of the hiring table. If you were looking for an ideal candidate, again, going back, what kinds of things would you hear from them? We touched on this a little bit before, but what kinds of materials, what kinds of things would you want them to display? Would you want them to contact you and chat first? What would you look for if you were hiring, say?
Yeah. And this is going to sound so hypocritical. I really do want a workaholic, but I don't want a workaholic in hours. I want a workaholic, and that's really the passion, right? So somebody, I'm constantly listening to all of these different podcasts. I was listening to this podcast this morning from On Being. So somebody that's just fascinated about everything, because all of those things you bring into space. People probably get so sick and tired of me. Oh yeah, I was listening to this. We can take this and use this and make this work. I just listened to this wonderful podcast on the guy who created StoryCorps, right? and the value of listening. And so I can't tell you how many times I've used that sense and all of these different things. But someone that's curious about everything, someone that has the passion, and there's a balance there, right? Because what's really fascinating, when, like, I started with a telephone interview for this job, and I think there was something about my letter that made the person I report to now think, oh, wait a second, maybe this person's passionate, or maybe she's this radical, crazy person. And so that that conversation, and I could really, it was clear from that first conversation to get at, right? And so, like, I think I had to temper that. But more than anything, just someone that's, you can learn the basics, right? But someone that wants to make a difference in the world, someone that's willing to listen to absolutely everyone, someone that's like, yeah, I want to make a difference, but I feel that the difference can only come when all the voices are at the table, literally all the voices at the table, but also someone who realized at some point you've got to stop listening and put some of that together, right? And have an agenda and move forward, realizing that everybody can't be happy all the time and that life isn't fair. But what can we do to look at this in a holistic way and see how we can work together, for lack of a better way to put it, to make things better for the greater good in the healthcare space.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. I think I've already run over our time a little bit. I so appreciate you joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop our broadcast now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.